God,
grant me the serenity
to accept the things I cannot change,
the courage to change the things I can,
and the wisdom to know the difference.
In this episode of Overcoming Addiction, we will be talking about the importance of harm reduction with the Access Drug User Health Program. Tonight's guest is Kristen Doneski. Here's your host, Paul Hammersley.
Welcome to another episode of Overcoming Addiction. I'm Paul Hammersley, and I'm also the president of Malden Overcoming Addiction. And tonight we have a very special show. We're going to start off the new year, and we're going to be talking about harm reduction. I have a fantastic guest. Her name is Kristen Doneski. Kristen,
hi.
How are you?
Good. How are you? Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you, Kristen. I want to start off, we've worked together in the past. I've had you do a couple of trainings, some Narcan trainings, and it used to be the Cambridge Needle Exchange. So I just want to make sure we get it right. So now the name has changed to Access Drug User Health Program. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Awesome. So let's, a lot of people, you hear the word harm reduction, can mean many different things. Some people don't know what it means. So the goal of tonight is let's just go through beginning to end. Let's talk all about what harm reduction is, how people can use harm reduction, how people talk about it, what's good practices. So I'll just dive right in. And Kristen, can you explain for people who don't know what the Access program is?
Sure. So we started in the 90s, around 94, as Cambridge Cares with the AIDS Action Committee. We then transferred over to Cambridge Needle Exchange in the early 2000s. And now we are Access. We merged with Fenway Health recently, so we are now called Access, the Drug User Health Program. So a lot of times when you hear kind of the name Needle Exchange, people think of very much one service to drug users,
right.
Which is a brilliant service. It's stopping the transmission of HIV and hepatitis C among people who inject drugs. And their partners, the sexual partners, and also family, friends, children. But we do a lot more than that. So we've actually been doing all of this since the early 90s, but recently, since we just merged with Fenway Health, I think we're seeing a little bit more in a lens of a community health clinic as well. So we have a community where we cultivate a drop-in center in Cambridge in Central Square, and then also in Jamaica Plain, which is near Jackson Square. So we have those two spots. Oftentimes people don't know about that. And we really try to create a community for people to feel safe while they're in any stage of use or recovery. So we serve people who inject any sort of drug and people who are using opioids. So that can be methadone or Suboxone or any other prescription opioids as well.
And now you mentioned you have a drop-in center. What typically happens when a person, who would go to the drop-in center?
Yeah.
Who would come in?
It can be a wide range of people. It could be people looking for support, who need to get connected. Something's going on with their health insurance. They need to get connected to a primary care physician. They want to go to detox.
So you do it all?
Yes, we do. We do a lot. We do a lot of flyby, sort of low threshold case management on the spot. As long as you're a member with us when you come in with whatever need you have, we try to get you either transportation to places to detox, to the ER, to see a doctor. We also do wound care on site. And we do phlebotomy, HIV, Hep C, and STI testing on site. So if someone comes in with a recent exposure and they're worried about it, we can kind of guide them through that process of getting tested. And then we also do behavioral health referrals within Fenway Health. So there's a lot of stuff that I think sometimes people don't always know about what goes on inside a needle exchange and an overdose prevention program.
I didn't know. I was on the website that you gave me, and I was just combing through, and I could not believe all the information. I had no idea of, I'd say 75%. I just thought, like everyone else, Narcan training, drug use, your typical.
Safe supplies, yeah.
Yes, that's what I thought.
Yeah.
And I was amazed going through the website, and good for you. That's amazing work you guys are doing, and what a great resource to have.
Yeah, there's a great team. We have a great team.
So what is harm reduction, Kristen, in theory and in practice? What exactly is it?
Big question, yes. So I think we hear the term used a lot in a lot of different organizations and communities see it in a different way and have their own definitions. I know the community of active drug users maybe have a different definition than providers in different places. So harm reduction, as I've been taught by mentors that I hold dear and are my mentors, it it's actually a therapeutic kind of model, stages of work, kind of like motivational interviewing, where you're working with somebody to reduce the harms of any at-risk behavior that they may be doing. So that doesn't have to be just drug use. It can be eating disorders. It can be sexual health. It can be gambling. It can be video games. It can be anything as human beings that we do that might be kind of, you know, at-risk behaviors. We might not see them or hold them as necessarily putting ourselves at risk, but it's reducing the harm of behaviors within that. So there's actual models and approaches in the way that we try to talk about people being safe in what they're doing. So we know people are going to use drugs, right? I was thinking about it driving over here and some of the outreach work we do, and a lot of drug users in communities that we work with kind of further out in Malden and in Everett and other places are really drug users that are using in their residence, in their homes. That's a lot harder to gauge and do outreach and get people those services. There's still a lot of stigma and shame. So kind of talking to people about reducing the harm and making safety plans in whatever way works for them is really important for harm reduction. So it's really client-led or participant-led, drug user-led, whatever the human being thinks is going to make it safer.
Now, typically, because I'm ignorant to a lot of, I just was amazed with everything you just said. So when I hear harm reduction, I think about showing up, making sure people are using clean needles, you know, making sure you're not using alone, making sure there's some Narcan on hand, 2 people. And you mentioned eating. So what, I hate to put you on the spot, but I really want to know, what would be a method of harm reduction if somebody was eating poorly or overeating or just a really bad diet and their health is in danger?
Sure. Well, I'm definitely not a
Yeah, right,
nutritionist.
but how would you nail that down? How, like if someone would say, I have a problem eating?
Yeah, and we have a lot of people that, you know, have a lot of co-occurring stuff going on. So we know that people that use drugs also have, but sometimes there's a lot of underlying mental health stuff. So that can curb into eating disorders and so talking to somebody about what's going to be a realistic plan for them to keep themselves safe. So if they're binging, how many times are you binging a day? Can we cut that down to maybe 1 time a day? Can we think about what foods that we're binging that might cause more harm to the body? Yeah.
Almost coaching, like a recovery coach type of thing.
Yeah, sort of like that, except never pushing anyone into the direction of what they're not self-identifying as.
Correct.
So we might have an idea what might be really good for, you know, someone might be talking to me and thinking some of my risk behaviors, well, I know it's good for Kristen, but actually what I think is good for me, right, is something totally different.
For someone else.
It might not be where I want to go.
So what does it look like in every day working with drug users, their loved ones, family members, communities? What does that look like for you?
Lots of joy. I love my job. I love working with the communities I work with and trying to build advocacy for drug users. So, you know, oftentimes you'll hear people say that organizations are voices for drug users. I think at Access we really believe that drug users have their own voice. So we need to get drug users more involved in their community and start to break down some of the stigma that disallows them from being heard and what they need. And so I think there's a lot of joy in seeing people take, we say like any positive change. So any positive change that somebody can make in their life, whether it's about their drug use or not, if they're a drug user, is really great to see. So it's like today I sat with somebody for 2 hours to get his mass health turned back on, right? And that was really hard for him, that individual, to sit for 2 hours and call mass health and be able to get through that.
So that's what you did. You made the phone calls with that individual.
And he sat with me and, you know, did a new intake on the phone. And if anyone's gone through mass health situations, can be really daunting. And if that's not your priority, if you're using drugs or you've got other things on your list to do for the day, right? You know, he was also looking for a job and a bunch of other stuff. Thinking about sitting down for 2 hours can be really tough for any of us. So,
it's scary.
Yeah, on the phone. So, seeing the joy of knowing he left today, like feeling like, okay, I'm going to be able to get my medication that I need so I don't have to buy street drugs, is really joyous. There's also, you know, a lot of grief in our communities too. So we do a lot of grief support. You know, sometimes it's become so common with the fentanyl overdoses that we've had in our communities that there's not a lot of time and space for drug users to reflect on the loss and grief that they have. So I think one of the really cool things that we do is we offer that to people and we offer space to talk about it. And we're able to go through and really champion the fact that drug users are saving each other's lives. So when people come back in to get Narcan refills, we're able to say like, oh man, you like saved your friend's life, you saved your sister's life, you saved your mom's life.
So you're actually giving Narcan to people.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah, so those are, sometimes those are things that we don't get to talk about. When we say overdose prevention, it's a very, how do you do it? But there's so much more around it.
So, what is the current work that is being done? Like, I want to know about Malden. I know that you're expanding into Malden, and I'd love to know what you guys are up to in Malden. And while you're explaining what you're up to, maybe give some contact, a website, just something for folks where they can find you, and how do they go about looking for you if they need to?
Sure. So I didn't mention when you asked me the first question about our outreach team. So currently right now there's just 2 of us, and for the last 2 years we've been on foot in Malden with our backpacks, offering overdose prevention, offering any sort of risk reduction, trying to get the word out to get people on the Orange Line to Downtown Crossing to the Red Line to Cambridge, which is a long way sometimes. So we were trying to do that for the last 2 years. Now we've just been received a grant. It's called the RISE grant to have a mobile unit. So we're hoping
Like a van?
Like a van, yes.
Awesome.
Yeah. And we've worked out here with ABCD. Those folks are great, and we've done some of the meals at Salvation Army, at Bread of Life. So we've been out here for a little while, so we have good partners in the community, yourself. And so with the van, hopefully we'll be able to expand and do testing, and be able to get the word out a little more to people living in residences that we'll have a consistent place to be. So people will know where we are, and so that they can count on us. Because sometimes, it's been great being out on foot, but we don't always reach people that we need to at the train stations and other places. And now this will be an opportunity for people to for us still to meet them where they're at, but people to come to us on their terms, come to the van when they want to.
And what happens at the van? If someone comes to the van, what kind of services could they receive? They could actually receive services on the spot at the van?
Yeah, so right now we're working with the Board of Health departments in each city. This isn't a plug, but my boss would say, it's okay, go ahead and give the plug. We're working with them.
I work there in the day.
Oh, great. To try to see if we can expand syringe access out here. So right now we need city ordinances and a few other places to be able to exchange syringes out here. We can give out Narcan and do overdose prevention.
Right.
We can give people harm reduction supplies, wound care supplies. We can also make referrals. So if someone came up to the van, we'd be able to call. If they're ready to go that day, we could call. We could possibly get them transportation like an Uber if we have that funding to get them to detox or where they need to go, or take them in the van. We can do testing. We can do rapid testing on site.
How do people find the van?
Good question. So that's part of what we need to work on with our partners out here. So, I think that there's a few spots. I don't really want to say exactly where we'll be
that's
yet.
Okay. That's okay.
But there's a few spots that we do really high frequency outreach in that might be good. So we want to check in with our partners in Malden and see some of the houses we go to. We go to a women's house and also the Eastern Middlesex house that we were talking about earlier, and see where people think we should be. And also we have to kind of get that approval through the city and talk to fire and talk to police and do all those things. So we're in the process of kind of building the stakeholders now in each individual city. In Cambridge and Somerville, we have it pretty tightly locked, I think, in a partnership. We still don't have a parking spot for our van. So if anyone knows anyone that would like to help us with that.
We'll talk offline.
Yeah, and we're looking in Cambridge for that because we just need a place to be able to bring back our supplies and things every day. So that's a little bit of what we hope to offer in the van. And also just education, so risk reduction. If people are injecting or using drugs, talking to them about how to reduce their risk of overdose, reduce if there's somebody in the house that's using, we can talk to family members about how to safety plan and how to have those conversations, because I think a lot of times, and I'm sure you've experienced this many times, when you're talking to family members, they're just not sure how to broach it, even if it's their partner or their child. So maybe being a middle resource for that would be something we could offer as well.
That's amazing. And so how, is there a website? Is there a way people can actually reach out to you?
Yeah, so if you go, we have a Facebook page, Access Drug Users Health Program. And then also we have an Instagram page, which is pretty new.
Access Drug Users Health
Health
Program
Program.
on Facebook. Okay.
And on Instagram, if you do Instagram, we're hoping to post on both sites where we'll be for outreach. So that will be something new that will be starting to happen.
Same name on Instagram.
Yeah.
Awesome.
I think it's Access DUHP for Instagram.
Access DUHP, and is there an actual website that folks can just go to, or an email?
Yeah, if you just Google Access Drug User Health Program, it will come
get it
up,
all.
and
Okay.
it'll be Fenway Health's.
I'm just trying
website.
to get you all the
Yeah.
help you can get.
No, I'm not so good. I'm still learning with technology, so that's
okay.
great. Thank you.
That's okay.
Yeah, that's great.
And who do you serve, or who do you work alongside of, partners?
Yeah, here in Malden or in general?
In general, Malden.
Yeah, so we work with first responders. So we work really closely with trying to build connections with police departments and fire departments, EMTs. Also,
Now, will they call you? Will you go out to a site while they're on a call, or maybe they call you after the fact for doing some maybe intervention work with someone?
yeah, so we get, for Cambridge, we get EMS data. So we get reports of where overdoses occurred so that we can inform our outreach. So that way, if we get reports that there's outreaches happening, say in Harvard Square in Cambridge at a certain Starbucks or a restaurant, we can then make sure that we're checking in with staff. That's also something our outreach team does. So if there's frequent overdoses in public areas, we will check in with the staff there, managers, see if they need Narcan training, if they're up for having Narcan kits in their restaurants or shops.
That's a great idea.
So we do a lot of kind of community advocacy that way too. Yeah.
That's a lot of information that you're giving, and it's amazing. Again, I'll say it again, what you guys are doing, it's, hats off to you.
Thanks.
Why do you think it's important for cities and towns to be open to syringe exchange and overdose prevention programs in their communities from a public health model, and how does that help?
I was really thinking about a question like this if you were going to ask me. So I think it's really important to talk about what, like we are tonight, so thankful that I can be on here to talk about this, about how much more we do. So a lot of times people hear needle exchange, they think that means there's going to be more needles in their community. Actually, there'll be less because we do community pickup. Our exchange rate right now for the amount of needles we get in returned to us is like over 200%. So the amount that we're giving out, we're getting almost that back.
Just so people understand, as you're giving needles out to IV drug users, you're getting double the amount back, so they're not leaving them on the street.
Yeah.
Okay, got it.
And we're giving people sharps containers out in the street. So, if we're out in Malden at the train station, even though we can't give people syringes, if they say, I've got a bunch on me right now, we can actually give them a safe sharps box. They can put them in a safe sharps box, and we take them back to the exchange, and we're able to return them safely since there's really no place for people to put them.
That's right.
So the reality is drug users are often carrying them and poking themselves with syringes that they've used because they don't have safe containers or they don't have safe places to drop. And if they do, some of the solutions is having them at police stations and things, which is great that they're willing to offer that. But most of the time, drug users aren't going to go to the police station to drop off their syringes. So maybe the hospital or other places, but that also is really rare. So we're able to do that, and we also we go out to the encampments and places mostly during the summer and the spring where people sleep outside, and we do community cleanups out there. We also have secondary exchangers, so community participants, drug users will take extra sharps containers, go out, clean up other people's areas, bring them back to us. And then also they'll bring out Narcan.
So this is people in communities will go out for you and do a
drug
sweep.
users, yeah, because they know where
Right.
to go.
And what's the incentive? Why would someone do that if they're using? Like,
yeah, and just because they're good people, and
That's amazing.
they want to make sure their area is clean. They want to live and have their tents and where they sleep, and that's their home. So they don't want to have those things around either. And there's some people that might be in a more chaotic space in their use and are not worried about that in the moment. So other people pick up that slack and they'll clean up community areas for them. And it's contagious. When I've seen kind of people come in and start caring about their space and picking it up, more and more people will ask for things and what they can do to help. And that's something else that we don't really get to talk about a lot around our community is that I don't like the term volunteer necessarily. It's great if people want to volunteer, but our participants are active members in our community every day, no matter if they're saving lives, if they're helping us around the drop-in. I've gone on outreach with people that have been helping me, especially when we're short-staffed and need support. And that can be tricky because, I believe in paying people for what they're doing.
Right.
But it's important to know that, sometimes I think the idea is that we have this community center where everyone, gets high and comes in and hangs out. And we do have a lot of people that are high. And even when they're high, that could be their baseline. It doesn't mean they're not functioning and then they're not helping out their community or doing other things or working. And we know people that use drugs that live in residences, are keeping their apartments or keeping their homes, are working. It's when their use gets into a chaotic stage that they're not able to do that.
Are you finding that any of, or are you even offering this, like, is there methadone or Suboxone use through what you're doing as far as trying to help someone maybe not inject drugs if they are, if they're willing to maybe go to, what will that look like if do you find people are willing to go to Suboxone or go to methadone or Vivitrol? Is that come into play at all?
Yeah, good question. So we actually, and I didn't mention it, so thank you. We have an OBOT program. So we have a Suboxone program through Fenway Health. So right now, if somebody was to come in and say they wanted to get on Suboxone, we would be able to get them hopefully an appointment the next day. With our Fenway Health team. If they wanted to go to a different clinic, maybe it's closer to their home in Somerville, like Column Health or somewhere else, we're able to help them through that process, make the calls with them. Usually intakes are taking like 2 or 3 days, which if you're really struggling and don't want to use street drugs and are trying to get on Suboxone or methadone, it can be a long time to wait a week before you can get that medication. So,
and that's what it's like with Vivitrol. You have, from what I understand, you have to go about 10 days and produce a negative urine before you could get the Vivitrol shot. Is that fair in saying?
Yes.
And then a lot of people don't want to wait that time.
Yeah, or they try and they just can't get
That's
to
correct.
it. Yeah.
And what's the difference? A lot of people ask me, what's the difference between Suboxone and methadone? Like, what's the actual difference? You know that methadone is a liquid, Suboxone is a tablet that just dissolves under the tongue.
Yeah.
So, like, is it what's best for the person when they do an intake with a physician? Is that what's happening, or does the person actually ask for it?
It depends. Yeah, it depends.
Every case is different.
Yeah, I think in old school days, most of the time people were just given methadone. And it was kind of depending on your dosage. A lot of times people either start off too much or too little, and then they're caught in a web of having to go to the clinic every day, which can be a lot for people to feel like they have to start a new life, right, in your recovery, and then feel like you're going to the clinic every day can be a lot for people. So Suboxone is an option, an opioid antagonist that can actually help people kind of start to live on their own and be able to take their own films and be able to take their own pills in the way that they want to. So you hear a lot of times people saying, like, I can't wait till I can get to my take-homes for methadone.
Right.
And that, to me, oftentimes, for me personally, and not as an Access employee, my personal view is it's like you have to prove that you're good enough to have these take-homes, and that
I'm familiar with that.
Yeah, that can be really tough, and it can also just build up resentment in you trying to actually stop using a street medication and trying to make a positive change, and being told, like, okay, well, that's great, but why don't you prove it to us that you can actually take care of yourself?
That's correct.
So that can
some
be
people
hard.
do abuse the take-home, but again, it's like anything else in this world. Things happen.
Yeah.
And I do understand everything you just said, and that's, again, a boatload of awesome information. And we have a couple of minutes left.
Okay.
And I want to ask you.
That went fast.
Yeah, we have a couple of minutes left.
Okay.
So what are some of the things that you feel are important for people to know about drug users and their role in either reducing the harm of stigma in their families, communities, cities, etc.? Big question.
Yeah.
Big question.
I think it's just important to remember that drug users are human beings. And there's many layers to us as human beings, right? And so we can be many things at the same time. So, it's not, often you will hear, like, that's a bad person. and I actually saw a meme or something on Facebook the other day where a drug user is a bad person, right? It would be it would be very simple in our world, especially in our world right now, if we could just kind of separate those things, right? And this is bad and this is good and this is where we are, but that's not who we are as human beings, right? So I was thinking about, as you asked me that question, a young woman who I talked to today who had just talked to her sister over the holidays for the first time in 4 or 5 years. And I think it's important to remember, and that was because of some of the shame and the stigma of her drug use. And she said herself, you know, I needed to get to a more stable place where and she's still using drugs, right? But for her, she's at a more stable place in her drug use that she could reach out to her sister. And she was showing me pictures of them dyeing their hair together and all of these things that I think it's really important for us to remember, that drug users have families, drug users are connected to people, they're beautiful souls, they're some of the most resilient people I've ever met, and that they're using drugs to cope with a lot of other stuff. So when we talk about childhood trauma, when we talk about, you know, reasons why all of us do things to help self-soothe ourselves that maybe we didn't learn how to do when we were little. For some people, drugs is that way to escape for a while, and you know, and also soothe some of the things that maybe they haven't gotten taken care of. I know I have a lot of mental health stuff that I you know, still need to address as human beings. When we ask our intake, yeah, we say like, have you ever had anxiety or depression? I feel like that's just what human beings have, right? At different levels in their life or layers. So
it looks different for everybody.
It does look different for everybody. So in the same way that people choose different drugs for different reasons, and there's no like good drugs or bad drugs, if we really want to get into, you know, other types of things, that's a bigger conversation. But I think just to remember that people are very complicated and that drug users are human.
And Kristen, again, I told you it goes by so quick. I could go on with you for another 30 minutes with snapping my fingers. So I want to thank you for coming on the show. And you can visit us on our Facebook page at Malden Overcoming Addiction, at Twitter, it's at Malden Overcomes, Instagram at Malden Overcomes. You can get us on our YouTube channel, it's just Malden Overcoming Addiction. There are multiple ways for you to contact us, so if you're hurting, if you need assistance, if you need any type of help, please check in with us. We want to hear from you, and until next month, we'll see you later. Take care.